Hogy valahol gépet alkalmazott a használatban, hogy használnak, hogy sokkal használnak.
Okay, welcome everybody. Pariegak, Abril Karadun to Abril Bookstore and to Roslyn Art Gallery. Let me just say before we start, yesterday was the opening of Sirun Yeretsian's Four Seasons, this art exhibit that you can enjoy during tonight's program. It's basically a marvel of traditional ancient Armenian patterns and motifs and symbols, and these are limited edition prints we have, so we have more information on this flyer. So today we're very happy to have all the way from New York author Samuel Armen. Here to present his new book within A Diminishing Caricature. So, and I don't know what it is, every time we have authors from New York, they're always just more out there, more vibrant, more in the moment. Even the way they look at you is just aware, you know. I'm not sure, might be the subways there, I don't know, being with people all the time, having to interact. They're not like us, you know, just separated. We're just talking about even our posture. Over here, we're just slouched, but over there, they're just, I don't know. But it's very inspiring, and he's from Gyumri, which adds to that even more, so. But also, on another note, yeah, he was born in Gyumri before a very tragic event, the earthquake. But I want to say, wherever the way life led you on this voyage, you ended up in New York and is a teacher now, and you wrote this amazing book, so I'm really happy about that. We also have with us another guest who's going to officially introduce the author. He's a great friend of Abril's, Jano Boghosian. He's one of those few young people that actually comes to our bookstore and buys Armenian books and lots of other books, and he's interested and he follows Armenian subjects and functions. He's in this. He leads the Scouts, and they met 6 years ago with a AGBU internship in Yerevan. They were housemates. So with that, I'd like to invite Jano Boghosian. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jano Boghosian. I first met Samuel Armen 5 years ago in Yerevan when 21 Armenians from literally all around the globe convened into a house in the neighborhood of Aigestan in Yerevan to spend 6 weeks with the HBU Yerevan Summer Internship Program. The beautiful thing about programs such as that one is that while they serve many purposes, in some cases it's self-discovery, even if it's unintentional sometimes. So that summer, Sam wrote a 3-part article in the Armenian publication Hetk, where he gives a glimpse into his early childhood. Sam was born in Gyumri in October 1988, less than 2 months before the devastating earthquake on December 7th. Having spent the first few years of his life in an orphanage, he was fortunate enough to have been adopted by a wonderful family from Long Island, New York, where he was raised in an environment that fostered his creative development as a person and as a writer, evidenced by the fact that his father, Garo Armen, founded the Children of Armenia Fund. How many of you have actually heard of the Children of Armenia Fund? It's a fantastic organization, and it's the ideal way an organization should be run because they help people help themselves, and I think that's and investing into the children of those villages. I think that's definitely the way to go. So, in 2011, he returned to Gyumri during our internship to unravel the details about his past, from which he had been protected for so long. 3 years ago, we were sitting in a cafe in Glendale when Sam was writing his book, and I'm sure he's ecstatic about sharing it with you all tonight. He's a very talented writer with an endlessly creative mind and an even more fascinating book. His book, Within a Diminishing Caricature, is told through hundreds of literary allusions, 65 vignettes, and an LSD-influenced suicide note that only scratches the surface of the forces that reveal the cause of a young man's suicide. He says it himself, This is ultimately not an autobiography. This is a necrography, the story of one's death, and an uncoming of age story, the story of one's fragmentation, and a psychosocial adventure book through the ghosts of depression. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you all tonight, my friend and author, Samuel Armen.
Hello, everyone. And thank you for having me at Abril. Thank you, Jano. I like to start all of these by sort of talking about a different psychological or sociological theory that is, you guys can hear me, yeah? Okay, that is, that the book discusses. So what I want to discuss is just the idea of intelligence. So there's this quote, "If I know you're very good at music, I can predict with just about zero accuracy whether you're good or bad at other things." And it's a deceptively thin quote, and it's from Dr. Howard Gardner, who's an American psychologist and a Harvard alum, and it's from an interview with CIO magazine in March 1996. So this man, just by show of hands, who here knows who Howard Gardner is? Awesome. Okay, cool. So besides being incredibly impressive and publishing hundreds of articles on the brain and the intellect, his greatest thing is sort of changing the way we saw intelligence. Prior to Howard Gardner, there was this idea that there was a singular general type of intelligence, what was called just general intelligence, what Dr. Spearman called the G factor, which sounds like it will be a hip-hop album eventually. This, little by little, from that singular view of intelligence, we deviated. Little by little, we started to think, oh, well, intelligence is a bunch of little processes and things of this sort. But it wasn't until Gardner where we thought about different types of intelligence. Howard Gardner, in his 1983 publication, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences, talks about 8 different types of intelligence. There's visual, verbal, this is summarily speaking, visual, verbal, mathematical, musical, natural. So there's one word I can't think of, and there's interpersonal and intrapersonal. These two are, I think, very significant for the book. Interpersonal is basically how well you can understand others, your social intelligence, if you will. And then there's intrapersonal, how well you can understand yourself. When you're getting mad, you realize why you're getting mad, and you're able to diffuse the cause, not just the symptoms. That's part of intrapersonal intelligence. So why am I talking about intelligence, and how does this at all relate to my book? Within A Diminishing Caricature is rooted very fundamentally in the idea that knowledge or intelligence cannot exist in a vacuum. It does not exist in a vacuum. Intelligence exists through the exchange of ideas and beliefs and feelings and books and arts and music. Not only does that allow it to exist, it allows it to evolve, to grow, to expand, and to proliferate. On pages 11 to 12 in Within a Diminishing Caricature, the protagonist he gets angry at other people's definitions of intelligence because he thinks it's reductive. And the protagonist is very arrogant at times. And he says, intelligence is just the quantity and quality of questions you ask and the quality and quantity of answers you perceive. And then he goes on to explain how shooting a basketball through a hoop is a series of questions. It's the angle, the force, a variety of other things. And the answer is, does it go in? If it doesn't go in, by how much do you miss, etc. Turning a page of a book is a series of questions. The most simple, I think, is what happens next? And then there's a million other questions, including the infinite pursuit of, but why? Why did that happen? So reading, in my opinion, is the perfect exercise in compassion, because you are essentially sitting down and listening to the strategically organized thoughts and ideas and biases and beliefs and concepts of someone else. The primary questions in Within a Diminishing Caricature are, how much is a life's worth, and what is the cost of a human's life? Like, I'm sure many people in this room, my life has had its ups and downs. There's been great times and there's been, unfortunate times. But it was in the summer of 2011, shortly after meeting Jano and several other people in this room. And it's great. One of the greatest things about being Armenian is that you bump into them on the street and suddenly you're home again. It's amazing that, even if you don't know them, if they're an Armenian, there's a feeling that there's a home right there. Shortly after Armenia in the summer of 2011, I discovered certain things about myself that disarmed me. Almost every quality of myself, my self-understanding, was kind of turned on its side. My idea of my family, my idea of friendship, my idea of my sense of self-worth, and sort of losing the sense of identity, I started to not really care about tomorrow or anything of the sort. And there is this one definition of depression, which is essentially when you are when you cannot conceive of a hopeful tomorrow while you're drowning in a hopeless today. And I was approaching that for about 3 months. And the internship ended in late July, right? It was about late July. On October 9th, 2011 was probably the absolute low. And I after a series of unfortunate events, I sort of sequestered myself with a page and a pen. And I tried to answer the question, why should I wake up tomorrow? And my mind did not think of anything, and that made me really anxious and nervous, so I changed the question. And I continuously changed the question. It became less and less personal, but it still it was either nonsense or it was nothingness that kept coming up. And then 2 questions came at the same time. 2 questions simultaneously that lit a a sudden and long-term fuse. Those questions were, how much is a life's worth, and what is the cost of a human's life? This novel began with a journey of intra-personal intelligence. It was me trying to literally search inside myself for any sort of things that I can identify with a level of consistency. And it developed through interpersonal research. Essentially just seeing why we do some of the things we do, trying to understand our behaviors. And after maybe a dozen renditions, a dozen rewrites from beginning to end, and trying to cram as many psychological and sociological theories as possible into the book, it's still the exact same thing. It's still an interpersonal and intrapersonal journey. However so low that the book sinks into, it becomes very lowbrow at times. It becomes, for lack of a better word, it becomes vulgar at times. It is still delving in addiction, in mania, in depression, in bipolarity, in multiple types of addiction, addictions to drugs, addictions to sex, addictions to wanting to feel appreciated, but having the desire to push away those who are the first to appreciate you. These are all questions. And that is, I think, the most important thing about the book, is it tries to analyze these things that people don't talk about enough. You hear so often, and I really hate this, you hear so often someone say, she ended her life because of the divorce, or he lost his job and that's why he committed suicide. That is such a lazy and simple and reductive way of thinking, and with that kind of thought process, you won't be able to solve anything. In the case of just a divorce, there are infinite questions you can ask. In that marriage, did she believe that her sense of self-worth was deeply and inextricably tied to that marriage, and why? Did someone she know go through a divorce, or did her parents go through a divorce, and what happened after? Was there the sudden idea of you have to choose a side, guilt tripping, the sudden appearance of scatterbrained psychologists and arrogant lawyers, etc.? The reason why we should be asking these kind of questions is because it allows us to learn much better, and we tend to classify things as immediately as possible, which is okay, except for the idea that suicide is the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds. We don't really think about that. It should be a kind of more known fact. And in the next decade, it's the third leading cause. So it's still a lingering problem. Everything we do is a series of questions. And everything we perceive, is a set of answers. Not that they're right, but they're answers. This book, to me, is a series of questions. And this event, to me, is a series of questions. Questions like, who will show up? Who will be interested in this topic? you know, will I actually say something that you guys don't know, or will I just ramble here like an idiot? It's a bunch of questions. Though I can't answer that last question, of the answers I received, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for coming out, for showing your support. Thank you, Jano, for introducing me. Thank you to the goddess Mary for sheltering me while I'm here in Los Angeles. Thank you to my friend Christopher, who has been with me on every book tour that I've been on, which is such a great feeling. And thank you especially to Abril for hosting this amazing event and surrounding us with artwork and just, I don't know, being such great people to the Armenian community. So thank you, everyone. And that's it. Do you guys have, I guess, any questions?
I have a question. I didn't get, is it a novel?
Yes.
Or it's vignettes?
So it is.
Collection of.
So the novel is broken up into 3 general parts that shuffle back and forth. It is a very large suicide note that introduces each of the 5 chapters. It continues in each chapter. So it'll stop mid-sentence, and then chapter 2, it'll continue. Then there's 65 vignettes, which are in order covering 3 years, from his age 17 to age 20. And then there's a story that the protagonist is writing called Along a Wandering Wind, which is what I'm going to read. And it is through these 3 different narratives where you look at different perspectives of the same person. You never get to see what's in his mind. You get to see what's at his fingertips. You get to watch him. You don't see, you know, he did this because. You just see he did this, and you draw the conclusion. You ask the question, and you answer the question. So yeah, it's a novel of 3 different major, I guess, narratives. And the idea is, I thought of kind of a detective story where you know the crime in the first sentence. You know this protagonist is gone from the first sentence that you read. You're trying to find out why this crime occurred, this crime of taking your own life. So you can consider yourself a practicing psychologist, even a sociologist if you want to look at it on a grand scale, or a detective. In either case, you're looking for clues as to why we do this. And the answer, as I think all of you know, the answer is not simple, ever. And it never will be a simple thing, because we're not simple people. Go ahead.
For me?
Yes.
Okay. So you said you're a teacher?
Yes. I'm teaching English literature in this thing called AVID, and I help with special education, 12th grade and 10th grade. So I help them get into colleges and stuff. And I help them with their sort of decoding English literature and their verbal comprehension and things of this sort.
So what is the source of the psychology and sociology in this?
Well, in order to get New York, to teach in New York, you have to jump through a lot of hoops. One of which is you must get a master's unless you go to a certain charter school. And I had to do basically 2 years of essentially adolescent psychology. And adolescent psychology, though it's a flexible word, is generally the range would be from 12 to about 20, which is very much the mind state of this character. He begins at 17, though he talks about experiences at age 12 in his note. And before that, I was studying behavioral psychology just on sort of my own. I was studying it at Boston University as an undergraduate and other things. I've always had an interest in it.
Can you explain why you chose the title that you said?
Yeah, so actually on the inside cover, there's a very short explanation of why this title. So there's this idea of assonance and dissonance. Assonance is when things, it's not necessarily rhyming, but it's when the syllables flow. So if I said, a litter of kittens were given a minimal drink of milk, nothing rhymed, but there's this sudden flow. If I say something like, apple juice is tasty, there's nothing that flows together, though it's a correct statement, I believe. It's dissonant. It doesn't have that flow to it. Within a diminishing caricature. there's this, everything else is flowing properly, and then there's something that doesn't belong. Diminishing is literally fading away. Caricature comes from a variety of etymologies. The most, I think, specific one is it is a overloaded thing. It is an overloaded thing, and its etymology also comes from a car, a literal car. And he's writing a suicide note in his car. So I could go on and on about why. There's a reason why the I's are taken out of the title. And it deals with sort of George Herbert Mead and the idea of the ego and the self and identity. And this is a story about someone who is pushing other people out of his life, and you're watching almost from a Picture of Dorian Gray-esque type thing, how each person he pushes away makes some sort of, instead of making a mark on him, it sort of makes a vacuum inside of him. It takes a piece of his identity away. So yeah, that's the short answer too. Any other? Yes?
Yes, I have a friend who is Armenian, and her son committed suicide, and she decided to stop living. And she lives in this hopelessness. She was always the life of the party, always the biggest and most generous donor, and does not ever come to Armenian events or just wants to stop all that. And we don't know how to help her. I'm certainly not trained, but we are her friend, and I thought maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
So you said she used to be sort of the life of the party and things like that.
Everything, the biggest, the center of attention, everything.
Robin Williams has this quote, and the only thing I'm going to change is the name because I don't remember the exact name. We all know who Robin Williams is. I think no matter how long we live, we'll always remember that energy that he had. It was incredible. It seemed like it was infinite. He has this quote saying, this man goes into a doctor's office and he's weeping. He's weeping and weeping. And he says, "Doctor, I need help. I really need help. I don't know what to do. I'm so miserable. Everyone's laughing at me. I really don't know what to do." The doctor looks at him and goes, "Oh, this is easy. Go to Bobo the clown. Bobo the clown will help you. Everyone laughs at Bobo the clown." The man looks up with teary eyes and says, "I am Bobo the clown." We can look at someone who is laughing and getting happy and grabbing everyone at the party, and we can say, "Oh, that's a happy person." You can also ask why they feel the need to grab everyone and be at the center of the room. Why that need? There's a shadow to everything we do, and a bunch of psychologists talk about this. Carl Jung, I think, is my favorite. The idea of behind everything we do, there are a series of justifications. To talk to a specific case without knowing, or I don't want to say case, but to talk about a certain person's problem without knowing the person, I think would be naive on my part. But it's about sort of understanding, it's about asking these questions as to finding out why. Why does she not want to go to these parties anymore? What was at the site in which she stopped doing this? Was there a certain occurrence that transpired? And if it's a little bit dated, but one of the grandfathers of psychology, Emil Deutsch, basically wrote this book on suicide, and it breaks suicide into 4 different types. And for people to think that there's different types of suicide, I think itself is groundbreaking. But again, the more you understand about these things, the easier it is to move with what seems inexplicable. I hate the phrase "everything is justified" because it's reductive. Sometimes the justice is unjustifiable. Sometimes you say, or everything happens for a reason. Sometimes the reason is very unreasonable. Genocides, bone cancer in children. These are unreasonable things, but there are reasons. You can go down into the biology and explain why it occurred. And yes.
Between intra and inter intelligence, which of the two, in your opinion, is more difficult to master and why? I'm sure that's a question that's based on the specific individual and their experiences. So in your opinion, and based on your experiences, which of the two is more difficult?
Oh my God. Give me a moment to. I think the harder one is probably intrapersonal intelligence. For me, specifically. That was the question, not for people in general, for myself, right? Because I've as Jano said, you know, I'm an orphan. I lived with many different people. And when I say lived with, I don't mean slumber parties. I lived with them for years. I lived with at least 3 families by the time I became Samuel Armen. I lived in different cities. I've spoken different languages. When I was 3 years old, I was able to justify staying up later by telling my guardians, I give you life. Because they didn't have a child, so I was able to philosophically debate them. And then when I was 4, I couldn't ask for a basketball. And I felt really dumb. But I still had this idea that people you can figure out to some degree. Not that everyone's readable and stuff like that, they are, but not nearly as much as, you know, anyone will say they do. Even people who think they can read can be tricked and deceived. But one of the hardest things is standing in your own way. You know, when you're sitting in the corner, and for depression, people talk about depression as suddenly someone is closing the walls on you. And you think, I did nothing to deserve this. Like, this is a great day. Everything was good. I wouldn't change a thing about this day. But suddenly, sad isn't the right word. You're being emptied. I think intrapersonal intelligence is definitely harder. And as a side note, if I can extend it to other people, I think people who are hotheads, people who, you know, always want to fight and stuff, I think they also have a very low intrapersonal, or not low, but they might find intrapersonal intelligence to be a very difficult thing. Someone with high intrapersonal intelligence doesn't argue, because they look and they detect, is this something I'm going to be able to persuade someone with? What's the cause? If they argue, they discuss. They don't argue, because they know what they're losing in an argument. Besides energy, it's many things.
Sam, I wanted to know what it's like to deal with students that had similar experiences in their life, if you've ever encountered that.
So the type of pedagogy that I have kind of sided with is culturally responsive. It's basically knowing what the students like. Every single class I start off by telling them, I write a letter to them telling them what I think my weaknesses are, what my strengths are, what my interests are, etc. Their first homework assignment, they have 3 days to write back the same thing to me. And I told them, your interests can be as huge as family or as specific as getting into Tufts University in 2017. And with that sort of mind state, you're always searching for what they like, what they feel, how they respond to things. You think they like Jay-Z, because they're all from Brooklyn, you put on Jay-Z and everyone's like, nah, he's a sellout. And you're like, oh, yeah, he's a sellout, totally. Like, I meant Kendrick Lamar. They're like, yeah, Kendrick. So I met quite a few students who have a very low sense of self-worth. Some of them are bullies and some of them are bullied. The outside, the superficial thing, they differ so much. I would say just trying to make them feel like there is worth, trying to make them feel like there is hope, that there is a reason for them to see good things in themselves. And if you can pick something consistent, not something, you know, don't cheer someone on over, you know, just a specific dance recital they did. Tell them they themselves are a great dancer. That kind of thing. Where you look at something that's consistent in them and you say, that is something that's very impressive. And if you can't find it as a teacher immediately, you should diversify your material a little bit, because you'll see it eventually. And I think everyone has something to bring to the table, even the worst students. When I say worst, I don't mean like lowest achieving. I mean the worst behaved, I should say. Try and find things that they like. Try and find things that they want to be good at doing, and encourage them to pursue it. Say, you like this kind of thing. Master it.
I have 2 questions. I teach here in LA, so we're trying to be like teachers in.
Can we give an applause just for all teachers?
because I've come across when you go really deep with your students and they share something that you need to start getting people involved.
Yes.
Then I'm told you need to stop that because it's paperwork and it's work. So I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but I was wondering how you would deal with it.
One of my students stopped me in the hallway and said, "I didn't know you were adopted." And looking at a 10th grade girl saying that in the hallway while I'm preparing for a lesson, like, I'm just like staring at her like, how do you know this? And she goes, "That's not important. I'm adopted too." And I was like, oh, do I say cool? Like, I don't know what to do in this situation. She goes, "No, I just wanted you to know." Maybe a week later, she was like, "Well, okay, so," and she continued this conversation again. She's a very, like, comes out of nowhere type person. And she said something like I think she was cursing off one of the teachers. And I saw her and I was like, "Why are you doing that?" Thank you. My voice sounds dry? It's vodka. He knows me so well. She told me that she was going to run away from home. She said, "I'm not listening to this stupid teacher. I don't listen to my stupid parents. Why would I listen to this teacher?" And I'm not sure exactly what was in this dialogue, but I do remember her telling me very specifically her plans to run away from home. And she said she's done it before and that it got her parents in a tremendous amount of trouble. And she was asking me about, when she turned 17, she was looking at she had everything prepared. She was like, "Okay, so the lawyer's going to say this, but, the child services, I'm not a child when I turn 17, which is in 2 weeks." And I remember her going on, and she was so trusting in me. And I said to myself, no matter what she says, I have a 100% responsibility to go to the guidance counselor. I'm not gonna write anything other than filling out specifically, going as in depth as I can as to why I think she's like this, what the problem is, and if I can. Again, I'm not trained in understanding her specifically. The guidance counselors who have her entire record, they know her quite well. They know her like the NSA knows us. You immediately tell someone. And if you betray someone's trust, you ask them, "Why do you think I did it?" If they say, "Because you snitched," say, "Why do you think I snitched?" Just wait. Eventually they'll find the reason why you did it. They'll forgive you for whatever you do. But if someone is exhibiting, if one of your friends, did I not answer the question?
No, my question was when administration tells you you're, you can't,
Don't do it.
stop going so in depth with your students because you're causing them more work.
You're costing money.
Yeah,
Guide counselors don't.
for you to.
It sounds like what they're saying is that you detecting problems that are already there is making them upset because I would just say simply that they're wrong. Because detection of a cancer isn't the crime. You had two questions though.
Oh. And then I read in the first page that you chose to write 666 words.
Yeah. In the introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering why. Was there a specific
Yes.
reason?
So I think a lot of people think that 666 is just the idea of the devil or something like that. 666 is specifically the fall of man. That's what it is. And this book is about someone who is entirely whole, as far as I could construct someone whole, and fragmenting them, putting them into pieces to the point where at the end they are this continuous void towards the end of the book. And I think it'll be detectable. The idea is that this is a book about the fall of man. This is the book about the fall of a man, and because he's not the only one guilty for the decisions he makes, in the first page, on the first page of the suicide note, which is somewhat visible on the book cover, but it's also, when you read the books, the first thing you see, he believes we're a mosaic of the others in our lives, that we are our family, we are our friends, we are our lovers. And when someone, does something bad, you also should be looking at the people around them to see how, is this an alarm? How can you help? What's the right decision? What's the wrong decision? Things of that sort. Yeah. It's not a satanic text, I promise.
You were saying earlier when you read someone else's book, you absorb all of who they are and their
Maybe not all of who they are. I absorb parts of. Yes.
or you're at least exposed to it, who knows if the reader absorbs it. But as far as you as an author, how did you deal with that sort of vulnerability?
So in 2011, I wrote about, being abandoned and how awful certain things feel. And after having to talk to my parents about how much I love them and almost feeling bad that I published this because I thought it could be misconstrued as being unappreciative for everything they've given me, which is everything I have. I don't think I'm worried about what people, of what comparisons people make between the protagonist and I, or anything of the sort. And yeah, I don't know. Did I answer the question? Okay. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
Can you read one of the most passionate?
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna do that. But is there any more questions before I? Oh, go ahead. That was awesome. You just appeared with your hand raised. Ran through the door
You mentioned that there was an Armenian character in the book.
Yes.
Talk about that character.
So his name is a joke to some Armenians. To Armenians, and to Odars, it's a nice sounding name. His name is Artyom Lavyan, and he's the only character who's a consistent source of goodness in the book. He's someone who has a level of equilibrium. He's someone who has a consistent harmony in the book, where bad things happen and he's grounded, good things happen and he's grounded. One of my favorite poems is by Rudyard Kipling, his poem If, and he says, one of the lines of If is, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same, that kind of idea of having this equilibrium, and that's to me, I think, what the best type of character can be from a literary standpoint and from a sociological standpoint. Someone who is consistently grounded. I don't mean that they're a dial tone or that they're boring or anything like that, but I mean when the earth is shaking, they're walking straight, and when the earth is totally fine, they understand that it has the potential to shake. Yes? I don't speak Armenian well. When I first came to this country, I spoke Gyumretsi Hayden, and few people understood what the hell I was talking about. So they kind of insisted on me learning English, and I guess this book could be me trying to prove I learned a little bit of English, a few words. Yeah, I'm going to have to ask you to translate that.
So, how old were you when you came here? How old? Here.
Where are you? Oh.
How old were you when you came here?
So I came here when I was about 3 years old.
Oh, and you remember the time that nobody could understand you?
So when you say here, do you mean officially adopted? Or do you mean coming to America? I came to America at approximately 3 1/4, and I was being taken care of by the best people in the world, who I still call Digin Mariam and Baron Krikor, who are just among the best people in the world. And they took care of me for about a year, but they spoke either English or, I don't say Spurka Hayren because that sounds offensive, but Western Armenian, yeah. And they played Thomas the Tank Engine and Sesame Street, And I was staring at that, 8-foot tall pigeon thinking, I want to speak, I want to meet him, I want to talk to him. So there wasn't an Armenian Sesame Street yet, but that's kind of connecting to your question. Yeah. But yeah, I came here when I was about three and a quarter, and I was officially adopted at I was at the Armen family by age 5, and I was officially adopted by age 6. It's a long process, being an immigrant orphan.
Anyway, there was a problem with your Armenian and the Western Armenian. There was a problem with the communication.
Yeah, there was a few things I said that no one knew. I mean, we have a bunch of videotapes where they still look at it and they're like, these are made up words. Like, and they might be. I mean, I'm 3. I could be making up stuff. I'm just messing with them. I don't know. But yeah, I think, to be honest, if you, yeah. One of the reasons I think I try and relearn Armenian, and every time I learn it, I absorb it very quickly, and I'm able to speak it when I'm in Armenia, and when I leave, it is as if something is spilling out. And I understand there might be a psychological incentive that you connect family and love and friends to English and to Armenian just by the incident of my life. I think of Armenian as, unfortunate circumstances occurring. But yeah, so 3.5, 3.25 in America, adopted at around 5. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Here, in your bio, it says that you're a publisher of Hit, the journal, that?
Yes. So oh, go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to know about, because I've heard about it, and I don't know anything. I mean,
So Hetka is awesome. That's the first thing you need to know. Hetka is a very political newspaper and online presence that discusses the politics in Armenia. And just general news in Armenia too, entertainment, media, sports, all of it, but it focuses on politics. They're an NGO. The chief editor is Abril Boghosian, and in 2011, about 21 of us from all over the world, from Moscow to Damascus to Vancouver, to Miami, all met in Armenia under this internship. And my internship was through journalism. So I met with them, and for about 2 months, I was writing these kind of, I don't say fluff articles, but these things about like what it's like to be living in Armenia. So I would shadow other people. I'd learn, what is it like to be an artist in Armenia? Mary was working in a museum, in an art gallery, and I wanted to sort of understand what it's like to do that in Armenia. So that was an entry. And there were all these entries about certain facets of Armenia, and I tried to spin it in such a way that diaspora feels completely, not diaspora, Odars feel extremely comfortable reading this, saying, oh, this is, I get it. Like, I understand, one of them was, how to be a vegan in Armenia, which is not easy. But I know from experience. So after a while, I think maybe it was in like the second week, Edik stopped me and he goes, you're adopted from Gyumri. And I said, yeah. And he said, do you want to, he just like kind of waited, because I think he didn't want to be offensive. And I said, yeah, I guess I'd like to go to Gyumri and look around. He asked me a bunch of questions, like, do you want to meet them? I said, not really. I'd like to see a picture of them. I don't know if I'd want to meet them. Yeah, it was through Abril Boghosian that I was able to do this journey. And the first article, which was published like on a cover page of a newspaper, which is the weirdest sensation, sitting down in a cafe, someone opening a newspaper, and you see a picture of your face, looks like a old Western Wanted ad, like very strange sensation. They didn't tell me they did it until I came into the office, and they were like, "Oh, look," threw newspapers at me. It's a good time. But yeah, that was what I did in Armenia. I was searching for my biological parents, trying to find out information about it. If you want to find the article, you would just type in, I guess, my name and Hetk, and you'll find everything from article 1 to 3. and then all, I think, 21 articles about sort of understanding elements of Armenia. Again, it's spun in such a way that Odars. No. I was an intern journalist for Hetk. Edik Bagdasaryan is the chief editor of Hetk, and I think he's the founder of Hetk as well. He's a fantastic man.
So do you know about your parents?
Yes.
That was going to be my question, if we actually got to.
Yes. I would say it's weird saying look it up, because that's not what I mean, because it sounds so mean to say. But if you want to learn about this stuff, I will warn you that it's pretty dark. It's unfortunate things. It's honest things about the way Armenia was at the fall of the Soviet Union and what people had to do to make ends meet and things of that sort of nature. And you know, how you think Armenia has gone through so much in this, like, a 7-year period. From 1988 to 1995, it went through 4 major, you know, disasters. And, you know, I still think, you know, the earthquake, I was 57 days old when the earthquake happened, and I was already abandoned at this time. She came back, but I was abandoned several times. And it's a crazy thing that 25,000 people die in a moment because of the earth. And that if, you know, the earthquake happened 5 minutes later, the school children would have been able to be outside. You know, there's a lot of sadness to the story. There's actually, I don't know much about it, but there's a movie coming out. I'm sure you guys know way more than I do about it. I was just told, I think last night, a movie called Earthquake about the 1988 earthquake, and I'm like really looking for. It's the first thing I'm going to do is look at the trailer. That's fine. Yeah, meaning it's entirely in Russian. Yeah. Well, they call it Leninakon, right? In the movie.
I think, yeah, because that's what it was called back then.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, I think almost every person who comes from Armenia has a story, and because of the unfortunate circumstance that Armenians are often the victims, the stories are dark. They're very dark. So yeah. Just to conclude on your question, part 1 is everything I knew before I searched. So it's everything everyone told to me. All the people I stayed with, even the person who pulled me out of the orphanage, this Armenian woman who lives in Texas, who was staying across the street doing this relief stuff with the JCC across the street from the orphanage. And she saw me and she was wondering, what is this kid doing outside? And that became literally the first step of a lot of things being put into motion. But Articles 2 and 3 were literally embarking on the journey. And you get to see what it's like when you are trying to figure things out in Armenia. It's not easy. So yeah. I don't want to delve into it too much. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Is this your first book?
Yes, it is. This is my debut book, and it's weird because they met me as I was working on another book, and I was working on it for almost a year, and then this book needed to be written. That book will be out soon, though. I promise you. The second book. It's called Through a Just Lens. It's called Through a Just Lens. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm not here to talk about that one. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay, cool. Would you guys like me to read? Yeah. Okay. So, as I said before, the book is broken up into 3 parts, and one of which is this gust of wind that begins on the westmost part of Queens and drifts across to the eastmost part of Long Island to the ocean. And The wind is the only character in the entire book that is able to look at someone's mind and see why they do things. And the boy, the protagonist who ends his life, the same author of the suicide note, is the same author as this story that he's writing called Along a Wandering Wind. You'll know as you read the book that the characters that he writes about are characters in his life, and he is analyzing them, but he's also exposing parts of himself. So that is, I'm going to read to you the moment when he starts writing The Wind for the first time. So if you'll all turn to page 6. You don't have to do that. That was a joke. Yeah. But it is on page 6, though. Sounds from somewhere, or perhaps from nowhere, as a wind begins to drift across the coast of Queens, swirling about the many moving people, noticing and understanding, but not judging, a bit more intricate than your average gust. For contrary to general belief, winds vary much in their intricacy. It was merely spectating. In fact, that's what this wind is in its most approximate definition, a specter. It brushes across Steinway, Queens on a Wednesday morning, emerging from a polychromatic twilight and charging Long Island bound towards the eastern sunrise, zigzagging between cubic houses in a way only winds can, and notices beyond its own omnipresent gust the sounds of conversations, and slows down. It slows and slows and slows until it is at an andante pace. It follows a tall boy in a multicolored windbreaker with messy dark hair, and a smaller girl with chestnut hair and a plaid coat. They turn suddenly as if tapped on their shoulders. His eyes are contemplative and mildly searching as he scans the scene behind them. Her eyes are blue and precious and contemplative in a far deeper sense. They turn back around in a swing, not unwrapping their fingers from each other, and continue their early morning walk. She laughs, saying out loud, "Chemistry!" "The essential study of change within the elements," the boy replies quickly. "No," she laughs again and squeezes the boy's hand. He squeezes back. "Define chemistry in its romantic context." The wind plunges down into the boy's thoughts as he shuffles through his memories. Among the rippling ocean of interconnected images, scenes glistening and overlapping like sun-glinting waves, one picture radiates into focus. A ruby-crested wristwatch glistening as her hand wrapped around his for the first time, an amber candle flame casting dancing shadows of their fingers across the scarlet linen dinner table on their first real date. The memory pulses and echoes a hint of that night's harmony into the present. "How fast time goes when you're with someone," he responds finally. "That's what chemistry is." She hums between a cool smile. The wind gazes into the waves of her mind and is pleased to find that she is recalling the same evening and same moment, but her memory focuses specifically on the way his eyes watched her with a vacuuming adoration as she cupped his hand. An unusual aura catches the wind's attention. A peculiar resonation pulses from two figures in an apartment several buildings down the avenue. The wind races eastward, climbs up the pale pink chipped brick walls of a dilapidated apartment, and seeps through an open window on the west-facing wall. A young man holds the hand of an older woman in a small, disheveled room. Their blood is comprised of similar material, but hers circulates poorly. The wind senses that something is keeping her heart from pulsing properly. The man looking down at her has sincere brown eyes, a mane of reddish-brown hair, and altogether resembles a concerned hawk. His mind is neatly divided between physical chemistry and finance, his wife and his dying mother, his job and his education, the country he is from and the country he is now in. His mind fades into memories of Istanbul only a few years ago, when life was difficult but far, far less complex. He refocuses and becomes reaware of the open organic chemistry, biology, and pharmaceutical therapy textbooks, cluttering the narrow apartment. The woman looks up at her son through a teary lens. The wind recognizes a trace of the old humility she felt when he first began injecting the soft cleavage of her breasts with morphine. Now, the wind knows she's not only used to these injections, but she has found a vast comfort whenever she looks up at her son's aquiline face and focuses on his thoughtful eyes. It is here where she feels a new type of humility. the humility that one feels when someone else's love embraces them more than their own feeling of worth. She inhales, she exhales, she does not inhale again. Floating against the sudden flood of grave thoughts, he swears to himself that he has prolonged her life, that he has improved the quality of her life. The wind slips beneath the door, fluttering the cinnabar hair strands on both of their heads, and spirals throughout the dusty maroon hallway and out through a corridor window, continuing eastwards as always. So that's the, You learn very quickly who those characters are, because they are, I think, the most direct characters that the wind, or that he writes through the wind. And that's what this book is. It's, again, a series of questions that you're supposed to ask in order to try and exercise in, just general psychoanalysis, trying to understand why we do seemingly inexplicable things. Everything is explainable. It's not ever going to be simple or direct, and no one will have all the answers, and nothing will be permanently solved, but you can make changes through the more you know, and the more you seek, the more you question. Thank you. Do I say that? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Samuel. It's very inspiring, and I congratulate you once again. The things you talked about, sometimes I was thinking of all the crazy stuff that's happening now. You hear about it in the news, and the media just describes it, ISIS, or they had a divorce, they lost their job, but it makes you wonder about thinking about it in a different way. Thank you again, and we invite you for your upcoming book as well, so thank you. Also, let me just say, we're going to have a book signing reception right now, and our next event is this Sunday, actually. We have a mixing, The Secret of Mixing Colors by Rosemary Hartunian Cohen. Is for children and for adults, so come by at 5 p.m. this Sunday. And also, next we're going to have a great concert by the V-Shop Ensemble. They're a newly formed band with one of the guys from Bombir Rock, the Bombir Rock group, Arik Grigorian, and then Areni Agbabian, a local vocalist, and Artyom Manukyan, a cellist. I'm sure you might all know him. And we're going to have a concert here on the 23rd. We have the tickets for sale, $20. And that's about it. Thank you for coming, and enjoy the reception. And buy some books for your friends. Thank you.